to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Well, hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. My name is Barry Schweink. I'm a pastor, I'm a veterinarian, and I'm your host as we explore this intersection of faith and veterinary medicine. Believe it or not, we are coming up on our 1-year podcast anniversary. It's been great to have so many of you subscribing and following along with us. Love your support. And hopefully you will be looking for links in CVM social media accounts, as well as an email notification that will be asking for your input about the podcast to know how we can better serve you. As I understand it, if you fill out the kind of survey, everyone loves surveys, right? The Survey Monkey thing. If you actually fill out this short survey, there will be a drawing with some brand new exclusive Two Roads Crossing merchandise. If that wasn't incentive enough, I don't know. I don't know what is. But I appreciate every one of you tuning in and listening. So here's a question: how exactly does your faith and your professional ambitions, how do those affect the decisions that you make? How do they guide you and lead you in life? How do they take you down different paths? Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Cornell veterinary student, Adora Colicci, and she is going to talk to us a little bit about her journey. Adora, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with you.
I've been looking forward to this because I don't get to talk to students very often because students are exceptionally busy.
That is very true.
And you're just now, is this your first year at Cornell?
Yep. So I just finished my first semester. So yeah.
Round of applause. Is that that first year, did it meet all of your expectations?
I think it did. It was a lot. It was a lot to adjust to. But I'm really kind of hitting my stride now, and I really love Cornell. It's a great school. We're learning lots of cool stuff, and it's making me excited to be a vet. So that's the goal, I guess.
That's really the goal. It's always interesting. I've been talking to another student. It seems like it's been like a month or two ago. Was talking about how he was so focused on getting into vet school and working so hard, and then you get into vet school and you're like, wow, I wanted this to happen to me.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that sometimes. And then even in school, we're like, oh, gotta keep grinding along through all our classes, and then we lose perspective sometimes. But it's nice to know that the goal is getting closer.
That's right. Well, and what's hard is so there's always one more goal too, because you're working hard, and this is one of the reasons I was so looking forward to talking with you today, because you have a unique perspective. I haven't talked to anybody else that has had this kind of journey. You actually connected with CVM as a pre-veterinary student. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did.
So I usually when I visit with vets, they talk about their impact or the impact or the connection they make with CVM in vet school. But how exactly did that happen that you got connected with CVM even before vet school?
Yeah, so it was kind of just by chance. My family was going to church, and there was this other couple at the church who were both veterinarians. They were a bit older. And so my dad was like,
we're all a bit older. It's okay. It's all right.
My dad was like, you should connect with this couple. Like, they might be good mentors for you or whatever. And I was like, sure, that sounds like a good idea. So I ended up actually working at the clinic that the wife was working at. So that was how I got my first job in vet med. but they also had gone on several trips with CVM to, I think, Nicaragua and Honduras. I think they kind of did a couple of different ones in Central America. And as I started like moving through undergrad, I thought that like a missions trip of my own might be interesting. Um, and that was, I wanted to do something veterinary based because I did like the idea of getting more like veterinary experience while at the same time being able to serve somewhere and travel somewhere new. And so the CVM, that was the only organization I had ever heard of because of that couple. And so I'm very grateful to them for kind of helping me out with discovering CVM. And then it kind of took off from there. I've been to Honduras 3 times now on 3 different trips, all like during undergrad, my pre-vet career, I guess you could say. Yeah, the first one was the summer of my sophomore year, and then it just kind of, I couldn't keep away after that, and I brought my sister along, and it
You were
just turned
hooked.
into a whole, yeah.
That's how they get you. They get you with the first one, and then you
Yeah,
just keep coming back
yeah,
over and over again. What? So, let me backtrack just a second. Then,
sure.
so had you always wanted to be a veterinarian? Was that something that like was from the very beginning, or was that something that kind of developed? And
Pretty much, yeah. I don't, I might have considered like human doctor, but
mm,
that was like it. I pretty much knew that I loved anatomy. I loved the body. I loved medicine in general. And then I just I feel like it's a very typical cliche story, but I had always loved animals. So I was like, okay, I want to be a vet. And then I was able to start shadowing at a vet practice in like middle school. I was like 12 years old.
wow.
Um, and then I just kind of never even considered anything else. So
Mm.
here I am now.
So you had this, and that's kind of how like a lot of our stories began, right? It's
Yeah.
always kind of right there. Every once in a while, you meet someone who wanted to do it since they were 3 or whatever,
Yeah.
but it,
Yeah.
it's just kind of something that's always been there, and you see, God kind of growing that desire and that passion
Yeah,
within
for
you.
sure.
And it's kind of interesting that like then that your connection, that your first job in vet med was actually through the church. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how would you describe how would you describe your faith walk as going into like from high school going into your pre-vet time? Do you think would you describe yourself as a strong Christian? Did it weigh heavily? Did your faith weigh heavily in your decision to be a veterinarian, or how did those things fit together?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I don't know, like since I've kind of known that I wanted to be a vet for such a long time, I don't know if I necessarily like actively ever thought about like, oh, this is like God calling me to this necessarily. It was just kind of something that I was like, okay, like this is what I want to be. These are gifts that I have, and this is how I want to use them. Um, I went to a Christian undergrad institution. I went to, it's Houghton University now. It was college when I started there. Um, but so that definitely helped shape how I thought about faith and science and medicine, and even how I could maybe use my faith as a vet. Because at first I was like, well, how on earth is a
Right.
veterinarian gonna like do anything to like evangelize or anything like that? um but definitely through some of my undergrad experiences, I've started to see ways that vets can, like Christian vets can kind of have an impact. Even like you don't even have to go on a mission trip, just like with your own clients. So funny story actually, I got in like a pre-vet like practicum externship through one of my professors at my school with an alum.
Mm.
um and she was working in Ohio at that time. She was just like a general practitioner or whatever, but she was a Christian. She had gone to my same Christian undergrad. And it was great to work with her because I got to see kind of how she incorporated um her faith into like her practice. She would like write on sympathy cards, like, I'm praying for you, and just like little things like that. And I was like, that's a really practical way to like incorporate these things. And then like 2 months after I shadowed her, she took a job with CVM. And my dad afterwards was like, okay, there's a reason you met Dr. Song. Like, and now she's my region rep. So so that was a cool kind of connection that I had. And then she was a great person for me to start to learn how to like just reach out to people and love people practically when you're in kind of that client doctor relationship. So yeah.
That is not the first time that I've heard her name today. So Dr. Song has been really busy.
Yeah.
But it's good. I mean, the reality is, and even from a practical sense, you know that you have this interest in vet med, and you're still trying to figure out what that means and where to go and what to do. And yet these opportunities present themselves, like someone, someone within your church, you get a connection with someone from your undergrad, and those happen to be great examples of what that looks like in that next stage.
Yeah.
It's important. It's important. And I think that for some vets who might be listening to this, we think about, having to go across the ocean in order to make an impact. And yet really you just have to be the hands and feet of Jesus where you are. That's a really important thing. So how did you said that at Houghton that you began to kind of shape, there was more of a formation time of learning how faith and vet med might fit together. How did some of that happen, and what were some of the things, the questions that you were kind of wrestling with that you kind of started to sort out as an undergrad?
Sure. So I was a biology major. So it was a lot of like, how do I not marry, but like, how do I reconcile faith and science? Because we have it's largely an artificial split, in my opinion. But there is a split culturally between faith and science. So I did a lot of wrestling with that throughout my undergrad time. I was able to take a lot of different courses that kind of even focused on that. We had a course called Science and Scripture, and they presented different, like, it was mainly like what are the theories about evolution versus creation and those types of things. But yeah, a lot of like philosophy of science questions, like what can science do, what can't science do, and how far can we take it, and how I think the main thing that I learned throughout undergrad is just seeing God in like the natural world and in the science that I'm doing. And yeah, that's definitely continued with me. Like all the things we've been learning about in vet school, I'm like, wow, like this is so cool, so complex, and just like there's no way, like this right here is evidence enough for me of like a beautiful designer.
Yeah.
A lot of other people don't see it that way necessarily, but yeah, right. I'm very grateful for my undergrad, which I feel like they did a really good job teaching us that like faith and science are not at war. They are like, faith can enhance your science, and like an understanding of science, I feel like, can also enhance your faith. So that was the main thing in undergrad.
Well, that's a big step. And so for people that are listening, a lot of times we have, you say you call it kind of that artificial divide, right? Yeah. Between faith and science, and we just leave it there. We never do any more to investigate. And it's kind of sad, because as veterinary professionals, we are lifelong learners. Right. We're constantly asking and questioning and investigating. And yet there's something like that where we just set up this artificial divide and we leave it alone without going any further. You have to ask those questions. I like the more that you start to see it, even in Romans, talking about how all of creation, declares that there's a creator, and thinking about how, a passage like how the word of God sharper than a two-edged sword,
Mm.
driving asunder even bone and marrow. And then you go into microbiology, and you're looking at what that what the inner canal of a bone looks like and how
Yeah.
porous it is. And you're like, wait a second, in that verse, like the word of God is so precise and that like you see these, all of a sudden it comes alive to see
Yeah.
how all those things fit together. And you're right. You can look at People can look at the same elephant and see two different things if you're not careful.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. But
So
yeah.
then so from there you have this you have this time where in undergrad your faith is growing and it's maturing. You come in contact with some folks that get you hooked on short-term missions, and
Yeah.
now you're addicted to that. Great job. But then there comes a point where the rubber kind of hits the road, where um, you have to make a decision about going to vet school. And that whole
Right.
process of getting into vet school, how was that time in your life, and how did all that kind of transpire to either help develop your faith or shake your faith, or uh,
Yeah. So that was very stressful. I'm not gonna
mhm,
lie. The whole
mhm,
vet school application process is not fun. Um, but I applied to 5 schools. Yeah, 5 schools. And I hate like not knowing things and like just kind of being in the sense of like anticipation,
mhm,
and just like waiting to hear back is like the worst thing in the world for me. I don't love it.
mhm.
I'm not gonna love waiting for like histopathology reports, but that's okay. um so yeah, like November and December of I guess it was just last year, was a very stressful time for me. I was very anxious. I was trying to pray my heart out. I was like, what I asked God, I was like, get me accepted into one school. So you make the decision for me. I don't want
Right.
to have to do it.
Mhm,
That's not the way it went. I got
right.
accepted into more than one school, which was probably better for me in the long run to learn how to make
Mhm,
decisions. But yeah, it was I don't know. I feel like that period was more about learning to trust.
mhm,
That was a big thing for me. And I mean, I still struggle with it today. It's not easy to learn, to trust people or to trust God sometimes. But yeah, that was definitely like God saying like, okay, like I got this, like you just need to sit back and let me take care of it. And I was
mhm.
like, I don't want to. I want to be able to do something. So like I want to, like, I don't know, send a note to the admissions committee, like I'm a good candidate, I promise. But that's not the way it works. And I had to
Mhm.
learn that, and it all worked out okay in the end. And yeah, looking back, that's what he was trying to teach me, is trust. But it's still a hard lesson to learn sometimes.
Well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, you can't learn to trust and be patient if you're not put in that situation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why they say never ask God to teach you patience, because you're gonna
Yeah,
have to use it.
yeah.
Um, but that's true. And I think, and honestly, for a lot of us within the profession, that level of control and wanting to have answers, it's a pretty common thread. I think that that's gonna hit close to home for a lot of people. And waiting for your vet school acceptance is is one of the most stressful things, but there will be lots of other equally
Mm-hmm.
stressful things that you're gonna have to wait for in life. And so it's good
Mm-hmm.
that process.
Yeah, yeah,
So how did God get you to Cornell?
yeah. I was very fortunate. I had 3 choices. Um, the My one choice, I got accepted to Tufts, but that was kind of much later than I had gotten accepted to the other 2 schools. So by the time I had heard back from Tufts, I had kind of already written them off. I was like, you're too expensive anyway. Sorry, Tufts. I love you. You're great, but I
Right.
couldn't afford it. So it was between Cornell and Washington State. And it was like a hard decision. I knew that Cornell was not going to be a place that was very welcoming necessarily to my faith. It's a liberal higher education institution. That's just the way it goes. But so that was one thing that I was concerned about as I was making the decision. But Cornell is an hour from my house. I knew that I would need a support system throughout that school, and I knew that that was something that was important to me, to have my family close. And yeah, the original vet, who was the one that I worked for and got connected to CVM with, she had gone to Cornell, so she was like all gung-ho about me going to Cornell. Of course. And it was just kind of, I had grown up going, like, we would visit Ithaca for day trips, and we had gone to open houses there, and it was just kind of like the place that felt kind of like right, I guess, like familiar. And I don't know, I knew I would have my support system if I stayed close to home.
There's a certain amount of peace that you experience there, right? Like, and it's hard because it's not that Cornell feels like home, but you have that same level of kind of rest and peace in your heart like you would have at home. Like, it feels like you kind of belong.
Right.
And God's good about doing stuff like that, even in places where you're not sure why you feel that way. There'll be that instant connection. So how then? So you go from these connections, these vet connections as an undergrad, getting into short-term missions. You go through this process, God kind of making you wait. You make your choice, and now you are officially, because right now we're recording this during Christmas break, which means that your brain has not quite recovered all the way.
Yeah.
So how has the first semester been, and how has faith played a role in you making your way through that first semester?
Sure, yeah. So academically, I'm loving it. I've always loved school. Like, I'm just one of those nerdy kids who can't keep my nose out of a book. So yeah, academically, it's great. It's fun to finally be learning about things that, like, not all of it's relevant, but most of it will hopefully be relevant to my future career. We get to play with animals. Like, it's finally like fun school. So that part is great. The part that I was most worried about, it was like the social and like the spiritual part. Especially coming from such a like small private Christian school into this giant secular institution. That was a transition that I was really nervous about. But I feel like, looking back at it now, I feel like God was also working in that, because we have like these tutor groups. Cornell does a weird like problem-based learning type thing for your first course. And so we had these small groups, and one of my now close friends was in that first group, and she's the one who is, hopefully she's gonna go to Real Life Real Impact with me in the spring. And I think she's a little bit newer in her faith, but she's like very interested in it. And so that was just by chance that we ended up in that group together. But that was like really cool for me to have a friend who like has like, or wants faith to be a part of their life at least. So yeah, I've started to adjust socially, found some other girls who are really sweet. We're chugging along, and I found a good church. So I feel like that's another important part, is seeking out like a church outside of maybe whatever CVF is doing, or like whatever your vet school community is doing, like get yourself involved in the like actual like church community. So yeah, my church has been great. I really, really enjoy going there. So
It's easy to, and especially when you're first starting, to get kind of overwhelmed
yeah.
just by the fire hydrant of veterinary
Yeah.
medicine that comes at
Yeah.
you right from the
Tell
very
me about it.
beginning. But it sounds like, and it's interesting because, God not only provided this other young lady to be in your group, but he also provided you to be in her group. And so
Yeah.
there's this
Yeah.
this mutual knitting together that God kind of does to make sure that we have all the things that are necessary for us to grow in Him. How are you? What are you looking forward to most as you're going forward? Not just not just academically, but with your faith walk and your CVF group, and even with your church.
Sure. So I guess not really faith related, but I got a job at the wildlife hospital, so I'm excited for
Nice.
that.
Yeah.
Learning new things. Yeah, I guess just with church and our CVF group is kind of real small right now. We've had a hard time bouncing back after the pandemic. So I'm hoping that as I continue on in like vet school, we'll be able to grow a little bit. So that would be encouraging to see. Not sure how that's going to happen or when that's going to happen, but hopefully soon. And then as far as church and other faith related things, I guess just like I still have a lot of questions. I'm still growing and learning things about God and learning how to be a independent, like a Christian in my own right, because I grew up in the church. I just did whatever my parents did for a while. So yeah, I guess just more spiritual formation, growing in other aspects. Because like I said, in undergrad, I focused a lot on like, okay, how does faith and science match? But right now I'm trying to work through the problem of like suffering and how does that play a role in our lives and why is it here and how do we deal with it and how do we just talk to God about it and rationalize about it. So yeah, just continued
Just
growth, I guess.
just those small things,
Yeah, just
just those small
those
questions, nothing
little
too
questions, no
complicated,
biggie.
nothing like that.
Yeah.
Well, join us in our next episode when Adora answers all of those questions. Well, it is, we sometimes we lose sight, right? Because
Yeah.
there will come a point when you are going to be in a veterinary clinic and you are going to be looked to have the answers, right? In our faith, we sometimes we want to push that off onto somebody else, when in reality, every interaction that we have on a day-to-day basis, we should have an answer. We should be able to give an answer for our faith. We should be able to give an answer for who we are in Christ and who Christ is and what He's done for us. And so that growth process, it never ends. I mean, it's a lifelong learning. Whether you're learning about how to set broken wings at a wildlife rehab, or whether you're learning why suffering, God allows suffering to continue. Like it should just be part of who we are as believers, and also as veterinary professionals, right? We do this so that way we can provide relief for the suffering in the world, and sometimes
Right.
that's a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen to. So
Right.
well, I'm excited. So do you have any plans for any more short-term mission trips coming up, or are you gonna sit quiet for a little bit and let the vet school thing marinate for a while?
Yeah, one of my past trip leaders has already asked me to go again, and he's a lovely guy. I so want to go with him. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe this summer if I can scrounge up the funds. But yeah, I'd love to go back. I'd love to try someplace new. I've been to Honduras 3 times, but maybe somewhere else in Central America. I get a new stamp in my passport.
There
but
you go.
we'll see.
There you go. Well, and that's the thing. Like with CVM, you have folks going all over the place. I think the last count was at 60 different countries. I think for sure. So there's no shortage of need, and as you pointed out, there's also no shortage of suffering that God's
Yeah.
preparing for us to help to relieve and allow His love and kindness and gentleness to flow through us. So, Adora, I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of your story with us. It's really exciting to hear about someone getting connected to CVM even before vet school, and then as you come into vet school, just how that's going to impact you, not only your educational career, but also the people around you as well, because you will be used as part of that catalyst to grow that CVF group, which will benefit generations to come. So I really appreciate it and wish you all the very best.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, and for those of you who are listening, look, if you happen to know someone who's interested in being a veterinarian, like Dora, you should nudge them towards someone in your church. You never know; they might end up on a short-term mission trip somewhere, or shadowing with a veterinarian that may be the future great regional representative, Dr. Kara Song. That's an option too. There's so many different possibilities, and part of that is learning how to recognize the places where faith and veterinary medicine cross. It's our job as believers, as veterinary professionals, to learn how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you are blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.